Hello, everybody, and welcome to this Google Hangout powered by the U.S. Embassy Public Affairs section for today. This is one of our initiatives in engaging young African leaders, fellows, as well as members of the Young African Leaders Network. Today's Google Hangout is going to be discussing the topic entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship, we are looking at a global perspective to the successes, the challenges, and the best practices. And with me to do this discussion is our YALI speaker, Sheena Lindahl. I'll let Sheena introduce herself, and then we'll take it up from there. Sheena?
Well, thank you. I'm so excited to be here, Yao. I am Sheena Lindahl. I am the founder and CEO of an organization called Empact. And what Empact does is we celebrate the stories of young entrepreneurs and bring those entrepreneurs together to create peer masterminding and connection that can help accelerate those entrepreneurs' business. And we also expose people to the entrepreneurial mindset and to entrepreneurship as a viable career path. And we bring top young entrepreneurs to communities, mostly in the U.S., but we've done some international events as well, and share their stories and lessons learned.
Thank you very much, Sheena. So once again, I welcome all of you to this Hangout. We'll start off with some questions. So following our interaction with the young African leaders, the fellows, as well as members of the network, a few questions came up. And I thought that it would be great to start off this way. So some people want to know how to start a business, and others also want to know how do you know what to do, or better yet, how do I know what I want to do? This morning we also got a question in that regard. How do you start a business? So Sheena would like to know how to start a business.
Well, that's a great question. That's a great place to start. So I think that one thing that you want to think about when you're starting a business is yourself and your motives. So, for example, is your main reason for wanting to start a business to make a difference, to make money, because you see that there's a problem? So knowing what is driving you, whether it's that you want to grow, that you want to provide for yourself a job or provide a job for your community, those are things that you're going to want to take into account. You're also going to want to look at what your passions are, what your strengths are, what your skills are, and your knowledge. So you kind of take your own self-assessment to begin. But then you also want to look at your market. So is there a problem that you're going to solve? Who would want the service or product that you could possibly give? And when you can find that intersection between what you are able to give from the passion, skills, knowledge standpoint to what the market needs or wants, that intersection of those two circles is where there is a good opportunity for your business. Now, thinking about the type of business you want to start may be dependent on what type of intersection that is. So, for example, you might want to look at just a straight for-profit enterprise. That's, basically where you have a product or service, and you are going to sell that product or service to somebody in your community or a business in your community, and the price that you sell it for is going to be more than it costs for you to make it. So you make a profit in that. So that's just your basic business, your basic for-profit. There's another type of business, nonprofit organization, which the main goal of that business is not to make a profit, but rather to make an impact or to solve a social need. So with that type of business, you may not actually be paid, you may not make your revenue by the person you're providing the service for, but rather get that through donations or foundations or grants that are also aligned with that same mission that you have, that need that you're trying to solve, that social need that you're trying to solve. You might find other people who are willing to donate to you to help you provide that product or service. And then there's another type that kind of organization that kind of blends those two, the nonprofit and for-profit, which is a social impact organization where you are solving a social need and you have that as part of your mission. You do, you're not only looking at making money, you're also looking at making an impact, but you're doing so in such a way that your business model allows you to make a profit off of that. So, for example, if you're able to find a way to make to sell your product in a way, but a product that makes a social difference, that would be a social impact business. So, for example, what we're doing with Impact, we're structured as a for-profit organization, but we are making a social impact by bringing education on the topic of starting a business and on entrepreneurship to individuals and students all over the world. So that we're having that social impact, but we're also doing so in such a way that we're able to sustain the business and make enough money to keep that sustaining. And we do that by charging, for example, our hosts to hold an event as opposed to charging the students to come to an event. So you can kind of switch up your business model in such a way that you're able to make that social impact but also keep the business sustaining and make a small profit.
Thank you very much, Sheena. So, well, let me announce at this point that later on in this discussion, we'll be joined by 4 young Ghanaian entrepreneurs who have started up businesses, and those businesses are actually thriving. Just by way of introduction, the first person to join us will be Tonyi Senayah. He's known as the president's shoemaker, but he actually he's the CEO of Horseman Shoes, and they make shoes. That's a pure for-profit business. We'll also be joined by Valerie Larbi. She is the CEO of Clean Team Toilets, which is a social entrepreneurship venture that's focused on helping people to live a more hygienic life. It has everything to do with toilets. So, I mean, that's a very interesting business, so just stay glued. We'll also be joined by Edward. Edward Tagoe is a director at Ghana Think Foundation. Ghana Think Foundation is actually a group that mobilizes young people and encourages entrepreneurship and builds network that works. So Edward will be speaking to us about Ghana Think Foundation. Ghana Think Foundation is also the convener of Tech Camp West Africa. So later on, Edward will be speaking more about Tech Camp West Africa. Then we'll be joined by Angela. Angela is the CEO of Media Angels Consult, and her business is purely into media, everything to do with advertising, buying media space, and all that. Angela will be joining us as well. So Sheena, back to the discussion. A lot of people would like to know, so for startups, if anybody wanted to start a business, what are the steps to strategic planning? Is there anything like strategic planning for startups? And if there is, what are the steps to that so that someone can start a successful or thriving business?
Yeah, there's a lot of planning that can go into starting a business, and I think different entrepreneurs go in with different amounts of planning, but the more successful entrepreneurs go in with enough planning that they have a solid idea of what they're going to do and the steps that they're going to take in line. So some of the different things that you're going to want to think about are, for example, your financials. So what product are you going to sell, and who are you going to sell it to, and how much are you going to sell it for? And then looking, one thing that I like to do is break down whatever your product or service is into a unit. So for example, if you are selling candles, looking at the cost that it takes to make one single candle and having just one candle as your unit. If you are doing a service business, for example, say you're going to paint, 1 hour of your service painting, that would be 1 unit. And looking at what are the costs that it takes you to produce 1 unit of your service, and what are you going to be able to charge for that unit of service. And that's a really simple way to start thinking about the financials from the very beginning, and it's a step that a lot of entrepreneurs make a mistake on because they don't value their time. So for example, if you're that painter and you're going to start off in the beginning being the painter yourself, you eventually want to employ others, but right now you're going to do that. Remembering to count the cost that it's going that your value is incorporating, or that you're going to have to pay somebody else later on, so you don't start charging too little for your product or service so that it's not a sustainable business. So that's That's called your economics of a unit, figuring out how much it costs you to produce one unit of service or product and how much you can sell that for. And then that profit per unit, you can kind of figure out how many units you need to sell in order to break even on your other costs. How many units do you need to sell to be a sustainable business? So all of your other costs that might come into effect are your marketing, your internet or your phone service, all of these costs that you're going to have going on. So you want to list all of those out, and then knowing how much all of those will be, all of those fixed costs will be, you can know how many units of product you need to sell to at least cover all of those costs, and then from there on out to make a profit if that's the way you're set up and that's your goal. So that's the very, very, very basic of a business model is knowing those numbers and those financials. Obviously, there's a lot of other pieces that come into play too. So, for example, marketing your service. You will want to have a plan around how are you going to get the word out that this is a good product or service to buy. How will people know that you're offering it? So you want to have a plan around that, whether it's going to be, your advertising online or on billboards or in media, on the radio, through word of mouth from one person telling another person. Maybe you're going to do some sort of a promotion where if you refer somebody else, you get a small discount and they get a small discount to get that word of mouth going on. So you'll want to have some sort of plan around how you're going to get the word out about your service or product. You'll want to think about your team. In the beginning, most businesses probably don't need a huge team. You kind of want to start off with some sort of test to see how viable your business is before you start putting a lot of money into it, if that's possible. But you'll want to think about, what are your strengths and skills that you're going to be able to bring to the business, and then also what additional roles will need to be played that maybe you're not equipped or that you don't want to play. And then you'll want to look at, do I need to bring in a partner to partner with me on this business so that we can bring our skills together? Or do I want to hire employees from the outset? And what are those roles that need to be filled? And then thinking a little bit down the line too about what needs that you'll have as far as employing other people, and where will you find those people? How will you recruit them? So those are some of the first steps that you're going to want to think about in planning. But the other key thing to keep in mind is that the plan will only go so far. You can write out the most beautiful, beautiful business plan, and then the moment that you start asking people, will you buy this from me, everything can change. So you want to get a nice solid plan in place, but then be ready to be flexible, to shift and pivot as you start bringing that plan to reality, to manifest that plan and bringing it to market, because things can and will change. So you don't want to get too stuck in your way. This is the way it has to go. This is the plan, because otherwise you won't be able to be as flexible as you need to be in order to make that really work. The other thing that I really advise in terms of thinking strategically about the business is to look at what assumptions that you're making. So, for example, are you assuming that there is a need in the marketplace? And why are you assuming that there's that need? Say I'm going to sell dresses, for example. Is it just my assumption that people will buy dresses from me, or have I heard a lot of people saying, man, there's really not a nice style, I can't get a good fit, so I really want some dress that's going to be, brand new styles every month and has the perfect fit for me? Have I been hearing a lot about that, or is that just something that I want to do, so I'm assuming that there's something in the market? So the more you can go and talk with people and hear about what their needs are and hear about what their complaints are and hear about what the challenges are, the more you can do that, the more you can break down those assumptions. And even better, a lot of times, and you have to be careful that people aren't just telling you what they think you want to hear, because people like to be nice. So if you say, hey, would you buy soaps for me if I create soaps? People will probably say, yeah, of course I would. So you kind of want to get a sense of how realistic the answers that you're getting are. And sometimes you might be able to do a test with, for example, doing a pre-order. I'll give you a discount. It's 50% of the cost if you buy from me right now, and then I'll deliver the soaps to you next week. for example, and that can work for a number of businesses. For example, when we were starting up Empact, we had published a book. That was our very first product that we did, and we didn't have funding to print the books. So what we did, we had the book all ready to go. The last thing we needed to do was print. So what we did was we went out to the market and said, hey, if you pre-order, you get the book for $10. If you order in 2 weeks, then it's going to be $20. So we got all of this pre-order money, and we were able to use that money to print the books, and then use the profit that was made from that to then bootstrap in and put back into the company so we could grow to the next step. So the more that you can validate any assumption that you have, the more that you can get that plan right before you start going to market. Even, who the people are that are going to purchase from you. Going back to the dress example, maybe it is you go into the market with the idea that you need to create dresses for young people, but then as you're talking to people, it turns out that it's it's your friend's parents that want to buy the dresses from you, and it's a completely different approach that you have to take. But it's just a pivot. It's not an entirely new business.
Right. So just as a way of recapping what you've just said, you're saying that in order to strategically plan your business, you need to consider the financials. You also need to take a look at the marketing and possibly how to build your team or the human resources that you're going to need. But you have also said that everybody needs to be quite flexible, because no plan is cast in stone, because you can have a fantastic plan, but the moment you start executing it, you could have problems. So you should be flexible to be able to make some changes. And then you talked about assumptions, which should form the basis of every business that you want to do. Because are you going to do that business because you think people need it, or you're doing it because you have validated that assumption that people actually really need it? And I thought that dovetails also into research and development. But Sheena, is there a place for people that in starting up a business? Because some people would like to know how do you make networking work, or how do you benefit from networking when starting a business? That's to say, the friends that you have, the colleagues from school, your church mates, your social group friends and contacts. Do all these people make any difference in starting a business?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think no entrepreneur can make it alone. And the stronger your network, your network is an asset that you have going for you. Just like, if you have some startup capital to start your business, that's an asset that you're starting with. Your network's also an asset that you're starting with. So you kind of want to think about it that way. Think about how you can strategically use and benefit from your network in order to get that going forward. So a lot of entrepreneurs, for example, will use startup capital from friends and family who can help. So that's one way that your network can help. Your network can also help in being a great sounding board for some of those assumptions that you have, or for being some of your first customers. You may find in your network people who have the exact skills that you need in starting your business. You may find good partners or good friends who you already trust that you can bring in to be involved in the company. You may have people in your network that could help connect you to skills and knowledge. So, from an educational standpoint, using the resources of your professors or your teachers at your university, or getting looped into entrepreneurship support organizations. All of those sorts of organizations are there to help you get the resources and knowledge that you need to start, and it doesn't make sense at all not to take advantage of that. So building your network as you go along, and then there's also going to be people who know people that would be really helpful for you to know. So if you're able to talk about what you're doing with the people that you already know, they may be able to make introductions for you that can help you with something that you need to do. For example, say you're looking to start a company that requires you to export product or material. By finding somebody who is already doing this, you can then get connected with their contact who helps take care of the the exporting. You can get connected with their shipping company. You can get connected with all sorts of elements. So I think that to me, the thing that I've always used within my network is there's no way I can use or I can have all of the knowledge that I'm going to need. No matter how long you've been in business, you're never going to have all of the knowledge that you need to continue growing that business in a quality way. Every day things are changing. Every day you're required to grow and learn something new. So what I do is when I know that there's something that I need to know that I'm not, an expert in, or I'm not great at, I know who in my network I can go to that will either know that information or who will be able to connect me with somebody else who does. So that's something to kind of keep in mind, not only with the network you start with, but with how you're growing your network along the way. You want to be looking for people who are experts in a variety of different areas and who know a lot of people that they could connect you with. But making sure that you're not just taking from those people too. You want to make sure that you're constantly giving to your network, even when there's not something immediately for them to give back to you, because if you're able to help them with introductions and you're able to help them with knowledge and you're able to help them with whatever need that they have going on right now, that means that they're going to be much more likely when the time comes for them to help you, and you never know when that will be, that they'll be more willing to make introductions to their, maybe their closest contacts, people that they wouldn't normally share with other people, or to go above and beyond in helping you instead of just saying, oh yeah, you need to, boost your search engine optimization. You want to get your name out there more on the internet, on Google. Well, you can just go look at this book. Instead of doing that, they might actually sit there with you and walk you through step by step and give you all of their expert knowledge that they wouldn't just give to anybody. So you want to build deep relationships with your network too, not just a surface level. Hey, we met at this conference, and I remember that from 7-8 months ago. And then the last thing that I'll also add in there is with mentors within your network. One of the things that I think is really effective, a lot of people don't know how to follow up with mentors. So they'll sit with somebody will give them a lot of advice, and then it's like this awkward situation where you're not really sure what to do next. One thing that's really, really great to do at that point is to make sure you follow up with whatever advice that they gave you. You don't always have to take the advice that you're given. You're going to know your business a lot better than anybody else. So you have to listen very carefully to the advice that you're given and kind of get good at and practice sifting through, this is advice that I should take. I think I'm going to pass on this advice. Because you have to follow your gut and know what your gut is saying. So whether you take that advice or not, following up with a mentor and explaining what you did and what happened and how much you appreciate their taking the time to be with you, that will ensure that that support keeps coming and that they'll even introduce you to other people who can support you along the way.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Sheena. So again, just to recap, you were saying that your network could actually be the point for raising your capital. Your network could also be your knowledge bank where you can get relevant information, and your network could actually also be your life wire because they can connect you to the right people. But you're saying that instead of just always taking from the network, we should also give, or people who want to start businesses should also learn to give to their network, so they should be helpful in their own small ways to their network, and they should build deeper relationships in order to be able to benefit from things like mentoring opportunities. And for mentoring, you were very emphatic on the fact that people should learn to follow up on mentoring opportunities. Well, let me reiterate that we are talking about entrepreneurship, successes, challenges, best practices. We are looking at a global perspective. And our speaker is Sheena Lindahl. She is the CEO of Empact, a company that is dedicated to celebrating the successes of entrepreneurs and creating that ecosystem, that environment for entrepreneurship to thrive. Like I did mention from the beginning of this hangout, I said we are going to be joined by some young Ghanaians who are also successful in their own small ways or with their own small businesses. And we've just been joined by Edward Tagoe. Edward is a director at Ghana Think Foundation. And Ghana Think Foundation is an organization that mobilizes young people, inspires young people, encourages entrepreneurship. But Edward himself is also a technology entrepreneur. And Ghana Think Foundation is going to be convening the Tech Camp West Africa. Edward, welcome to this conversation.
Thank you very much, Yao. I've been following with keen interest, and I must say I agree with Sheena completely on the pieces of advice she shared. Hi, Sheena.
Nice. So, Edward, before you joined, we started the discussion by looking at first, how do people start businesses? A lot of people wanted to know how do they even get to know what they want to do, and then we went off to look at, are there any steps that people should consider in terms of strategically planning for their startups, and we also took a look at what networking can do. I think you got the full gist of the networking bit and some bit of the strategic planning, but I just wanted to have your take on that. Being a Ghanaian entrepreneur yourself and starting a business and running a business right now, what do these questions mean to you? How do people start a business? How can they, get to discover exactly what they want to do, and what steps should they take to be able to start the right way and proceed?
That's an interesting question. Most businesses that we have right now, went out there to solve problems. So you can see some of the solutions taking away pains that people used to face. And the most important thing is you need to figure out whether or not you can take away people's pains or you can actually solve a problem by making money. Because in the end, the most important thing is the numbers need to add up. And so as Sheena mentioned, you need to know your figures. You need to know how much has to go into marketing, how much has to go into wage. Would you want to go for 6 months, 12 months without paying yourself? Because that is when you expect to make profits. The other thing that Sheena also mentioned, which I perfectly agree with, is because we don't have so much literature in entrepreneurship, some of our young people tend to read about entrepreneurship that has been practiced elsewhere. So they read about books written by people with a more global perspective. However, some of the local, we don't have much local entrepreneurship guides. And so if you have some entrepreneurship guide or some entrepreneurship mentor who gives you some good advice, the most important thing to do is to find out which of the piece of advice given to you is relevant to the Ghanaian context. So you meet your mentor, they sit you down and they give you ABC. Maybe A and B would be very, very relevant, but the C is probably only relevant for a global business or for a business in Asia or a business in America where maybe some particular structures are in place. What you may have to do is to look out for how you can improvise. And improvising is what we usually do most at Ghana Think Foundation. And we also build on networks. You see someone very resourceful at a conference, you just don't go and you say, hi sir, I think I enjoyed your speech, and then you walk away. As Sheena mentioned, you need to build a network and you need to figure out what value you can also contribute to the person's life. It's a difficult equation, but trust me, no matter how high the mentor is on the scale, he or she still wants something that you could also give in the end. Could it be that you are so networked in Ghana such that if she went back to the US, she could maybe count on you for 1 or 2 tips? You must be willing to put yourself in a place where the mentor can benefit from you in a way. I wouldn't say the face value should be the same. Maybe yours will be smaller, but there should be something that you bring to the table. And this is something that we highlight when we have bar camps which are organized by Ghana Think across the regions. And this is something that we'll be highlighting very much when we meet at the camp probably early next year.
Thank you very much, Edward. So, ladies and gentlemen, we would like to take some questions from online. We have online interaction and people are asking. There's a question that says, I'm an international prospective student going to college in the States. My heart desire and passion is to form an NGO which aims at dealing with the scrambled agricultural sector of the economy. How do I get in touch with same-minded and passionate students schooling in the States or participants to help make my dream a reality? Also, how do I get affiliation with the UN to help me with the organization? And this is from Kwame Dinero. There's another one from Inoka Mankwa that says, currently Ghana's economy scares me as a young man having the intention of entering into entrepreneurship. How do you encourage me to put my dream into reality? I'm a final year accounting student hoping to go into entrepreneurship after school. Um, I guess I'll take one more and then we can look at it. Then we can come back later. And the next one is from Desmond Opokuwari. He says, I want to venture into animal farming and also to set up a foundation to care for the needy in society. How do I go about this? I need your advice. So, Sheena and Edward, we'll start with Sheena. What do you think about these questions?
Well, gosh, that's a lot of questions. Let's see if I can remember them all and try to hit on a little bit. I'll start with the first one, who was the student who is in the U.S. right now and looking to find like-minded aspiring entrepreneurs who are focused from a global perspective and on sort of NGOs and those sorts of things. There are a number of organizations and networks that you can become part of that will help you to find other people that are aspiring. First, I mean, with Empact, I have to encourage you to get involved with the Empact Showcase. And we actually are having a recognition event for young entrepreneurs at the United Nations October 29th to 30th, so recognizing the impact that young entrepreneurs are making. So you can get involved with that through empactshowcase.com. There is an organization that's very global that has really incredible people involved, age 30 and under, called the Sandbox Network. So if you're not already involved in the Sandbox Network and the local groups that are there for that, if you search Sandbox Network, I'm not sure of the exact URL, but that would be a great one to get involved in. There's the Young Entrepreneurs Council, yec.co. I believe is the website. They have a whole network of young entrepreneurs, collegiate entrepreneurs organizations. So there's a ton of different groups to get involved with, and then through there I think you'll meet a lot of like-minded aspiring entrepreneurs. So that's what I would recommend there. Going back to some of the other questions, maybe I'll pass on the next question so that we can all get a chance to share.
Yes. So Edward, what's your take on these thoughts? Well, one person wants to know how to connect with other like-minded people to do something around the agricultural sector in Ghana. Another person is actually scared by the economy of Ghana right now. So how are you going to encourage him to, take up entrepreneurship? And the third person wants to do some animal farming and set up a foundation to care for the needy in society, and they need advice.
I think Sheena has actually highlighted a lot more on the first one. She's given some resources, and yes, in business school or in grad school, or there are so many other platforms, networks that one could join. One mistake that people make is when they go to school, they only do the classroom work and they forget about all the other extracurricular activities that make them better leaders and better people. And those are the things that we need to begin to get interested in, because those are the things that in the future would help you. Yes, you could get good grades, but without connecting to other people who are in the same class with you outside the classroom, you may probably be found wanting. The other question, which is about the economy of Ghana, yes, we are going through some challenges. However, this is good news for entrepreneurs. When there are challenges, then it means there are problems and loopholes which can be exploited. Now we know every now and then the lights go off. This means that if you have some capital, you could probably import some good gensets, good power, and sell. So whenever we see challenges, we don't need to see them as roadblocks. We need to, as entrepreneurs, and that's what makes an entrepreneur different from the other people. We need to look at it from the benefit side. How can we benefit from the challenges? One thing I need to say, though, which is not usually said, is there usually is the right time for entrepreneurship. And so I know that most of the young people are always encouraged to go into entrepreneurship right after school. It probably might not be a good idea for everybody. Some people need to go into corporate world to get some experience, to know how to communicate, to know how to manage before they jump into entrepreneurship. So I know there's this blanket advice about, consider entrepreneurship right after school. But if you're not the type who had already picked up certain basic skills for entrepreneurship right in school, it is also advisable to go into work. You can work for a big corporation for 5, 10 years, get some experience, get some capital, get some network, and then you can begin to consider entrepreneurship. And then the last person who said he wanted to go into rearing
Farming.
livestock, farming. Yes, that's some good idea. One thing I need to add or need to highlight is he or she may need to consider demand. We usually talk a lot more about supply. Oh, do this, do that, do that, without necessarily highlighting on demand. The question is there demand for farming where it is? Are there raw materials? Is there cheap labor? He needs to look at all these nitty-gritties. In the end, he could become the best farmer or the best livestock rearer in Ghana or his area, and no one would want it, because there's no demand. So as much as he has an idea about his supply, he needs to research more into his demand, and that's what Sheena mentioned when she said you need to validate your assumptions. Will you buy it? And make sure that you're not asking someone who wants to be kind to you, because they will definitely say yes because they don't want to dampen your spirits. Make sure you ask the people who would really will be willing to take money out of their pockets to buy your produce. So these are some of the small pieces of advice that they could consider.
All right, so we take the last round of questions from online, and then we get back to our mainstream discussion. This Samuel Cranting wants to know, I have a great idea that may change the face of Ghana fruit export, but I don't want to start from scratch. How do I make a worthwhile proposal to already existing fruit producers to maximize this opportunity, yet still profit from it? That's Samuel. And the last one, he says, this is on finance. It's from Emmanuel, Thinking Ahead Kablanu. He says, I'm a co-founder of Our Global. Our aim is to impact the spirit of entrepreneurship among the youth right from SHS level, and also presenting opportunities in Ghana to them by constant training and coaching. Any advice for my team and to get more funds to support our vision will do. Thank you. This is from Emmanuel. So let's take these two. First one, he says that he has an idea to change the face of Ghana fruit export, but he doesn't want to start from scratch. He wants to know how he can make a worthwhile proposal to already existing fruit producers to maximize this opportunity and still benefit as in make some profit from it. And the second one, Emmanuel wants to know how he and his team, if he can get an advice on how to encourage young people from senior high school levels, to take up to entrepreneurship. Edward, do you want to start?
Yes. I'll start with the first one. So of course, I'm not saying that the groundbreaking idea that the guy has is not true, but usually we tend to fall so much in love with the idea, we think it's the next Google, it's the next Facebook, the next Instagram, which is fine. What I've learned from my experience in entrepreneurship is you don't fall deeply in love with your idea. You must be passionate about it, but don't fall deeply in love with it. When you don't fall deeply in love with it, you are more open to feedback, more open to change, and more open to mold the idea to fit the current conditions and make it successful. So yes, he has some groundbreaking idea in the food export business. What I advise he should do is to see the Ghana Export Promotion Council. They have some very good resources on where to go and the kind of funding he needs to attract. And what I can also say is, as Ghanaians, we are very particular about our ideas. We don't share because we are afraid people will steal it. What I always say is, if your idea can be stolen just by saying it, then you didn't have an idea in the first place. We all know what Google does. They help us with a very awesome search engine, but up to date, its efficiency has not been replicated. We all know what it does, but the core secret is in the engine. So you can probably keep what makes your idea awesome, but tell people what exactly you want to do. And if indeed your idea is a groundbreaking idea, there are people who are experienced enough to tell that you indeed have that. and we call we call a document NDA, non-disclosure agreement. If you feel you have a patentable or a secret source, what you can do is to have your investors or partners sign an NDA, which locks them in, which prevents them from replicating that secret source elsewhere. So that probably makes you feel a bit more comfortable. I'm not saying it is foolproof. Some people have signed NDAs and have still gone on ahead to breach the contracts in the NDAs. But if you have a secret source that you want to talk to somebody about, make sure you protect it and make sure that you speak to the right people. The other question was about how they can raise funds for a mentorship drive, a mentorship team. She's a co-founder of some kind of team. There are tons. There are several funding opportunities out there. What they need to do is to go online and source for them. And for most of the grant opportunities I know, if your idea is good enough and you are making impact, you shouldn't have any difficulty in getting some amount of funding to help you. This is what I have to say. I don't know if Sheena wants to add anything else.
Yeah, sure, Sheena.
Sure. I mean, I very, very much agree with everything that Edward said. I think, you know, in terms of the idea, starting with the first question, I think that especially with your advisors and the people that you're going to help support, you need to be willing to share what the idea is in order for them to be able to give you the proper advice on how to develop it and to give you, you know, ideas on connections or ideas on how to develop it all. You have to find people you can trust, obviously, in order to do that, but being willing to share and talk through with people, that's how the best ideas are developed. You know, one way you can maybe potentially, depending on what the idea is, structure it is to sell the idea by saying what you're, as a consultancy. So I will consult with your organization. These are the results that we can guarantee, or these are the results that we will give, but we have a proprietary process for how we go about that. So you don't necessarily have to you know, go all out and say this is exactly the system to the people who might take the idea otherwise. So that's one way you might be able to structure it, to kind of keep the you know, the proprietariness of it to yourself with people who might be able to take it. On the other idea, the other thing that I would add is thinking through how you can document your results. I think that the better documented the impact that you're having from a nonprofit angle, that is much more likely to get funding into it. So if you are able to show that when I do X, these are the results that we get, and this is proven because of, and however your methodology for proving that is, I think that's what people really attach onto. People really attach onto stories and documented results and statistics. So I think being able to have all of that and to be able to know what your impact is, the better you can define that, the better you'll be able to get funding.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Sheena. So we'll take 2 more online questions, and then we will resume our discussion, and we'll be wrapping up in a few minutes. So we have a question from Dickens Ochel. He says, how can young people in the social enterprise be banked, financed, and mentored under the irrelevant policies within such institutions? Wow. How can young people in the social enterprise be banked, financed, and mentored under the irrelevant policies within such institutions? And Bright Gavu says, I am the CEO of 2 registered Ghanaian startups in technology and consultancy. How do I get entrepreneurship funds to continue from where the company is now? Sheena, before we got here, we talked about how to get funding. So please, they need your help.
Well, so one thing I would put out there first is to really assess what you need the funding for and why you need the funding. So A lot of times, I think people will think that funding is the one thing that they need in order to go forward, and through looking at it that way, fail to see all of the other things that the other resources, or maybe even resourcefulness rather than the resources that they need to go forward. So I think that can always be a challenge. But if you've already got a couple of companies running, and you're looking to scale, by being able to show the the results that you're having, that it's a proven model, that should help the ability to get financing behind you, because you're less of a risk. And I know that from what I understand of finance here in Ghana, there is very high interest rates, so you have to take that into account too, and whether it makes sense to take on that capital. Maybe it's worth growing at a slower pace so that you don't have to take on major interest rates. Maybe you could instead use some of the profits that you're already creating in order to put those back into the business. The other challenge that you might want to think about is maybe growing, if you have two businesses that are running, growing one at a time versus trying to spread that funding over two businesses. So maybe one is more likely to get that return faster than the other. So if you can use the profits that you're getting from both businesses to put into one to fund some of that return, then that increased growth can then be bootstrapped into the other business and help that. So you can kind of use your profits to be investors into yourself, essentially. But otherwise, I think showing that you are a safe bet is probably the best way to gain that additional funding, and I think Edward would have probably a bit to say on that as well.
Yes, for the CEO of the tech startups, I'm wondering why he's running two tech startups at the same time. As Sheena highlighted, it makes you run thin, and you need to divert your attention on both. It's usually advisable to concentrate as much of your energies as possible on one, and get one to its feet. Move from the startup stage to a stage where you have customers who are willing to pay, and maybe you can even use a chunk of the profits from that one to start the second one. If you trust or believe that there are two very innovative ideas such that you can't wait, and if you waited, they will probably be obsolete by the time you start the next one, then maybe you would need to get some partners or some co-founders on board who will be willing to help you. But focusing on two startups that are in early stages at the same time is dangerous sometimes, and so my advice would be to consider which of the two has a higher potential of success, or if there are two related services or products, why not merge them into one and make it one company, and instead of you seeing as two companies, you see it as one company with two services, and with that you can actually control the entity a lot more. With funding, it's very tough and hard to get funding in this part of the world. I know, and that's why it is important to take your time and look out for very risk-free means of getting money. You can get money from your own pocket, from student loans, from friends and family that believe in you. I agree with Sheena. It's important to avoid the banks. Their interest rates are awesomely dangerous, 26-27%. With a startup, there's no guarantee that you'll be making enough profits to pay back all the money, and if you don't pay back, you are in trouble. So avoid the banks if you can. Avoid savings and loans. Try and see if you can bootstrap. A lot of the times, a bigger chunk of the budget is wages or salaries. If you can go 6 months or 12 months without paying yourself, just save food and maybe something to keep you. This is also your investment into the company, and with time you see your company's cash flow grow bigger and bigger, and then you can probably go out there to source for bigger chunks of funding. Most of the funding opportunities that are available here in Ghana avoid startups. And so it's important for you to also invest in your own money to get to a point where a bigger VC or a bigger angel investor can see how much you were able to do with $500 or $1,000, and then he or she can project in his head and say, if you could do X with $500, then if I give you 50,000 of it, then probably you're very likely going to get to point Y. And these are the calculations they make. Without you committing your own time and your own energy and money into it, they are a bit skeptical. It's easier for them when you have a proven concept, even if it is with a small budget. So my advice to the CEO is that he puts in something very small, no matter how small it is, and then he makes an impact with a small investment he made, and then he can go ahead and show to entities that are willing to support such businesses, so that he can show them how much they can make with their support.
All right. Thank you very much, Sheena and Edward. We would like to wrap up the discussion now. We've got barely 5 minutes to finish, but I wanted to touch on a very important aspect. How do you sustain quality as a business grows? We've been talking about startups, but we've been talking about startups with the hope that they will grow. So, are you still on?
Yeah, so with sustaining quality, one of the things that I think is really important to think about is you. Let's start with that, with you. So being an entrepreneur means constant growth. You can't be the same person you were when you started the company, 3, 5, 10 years in, because the company, as it grows, changes, and the types of needs that the company has changes as well. So you have to start thinking about your constant growth, your constant learning, your constant experimenting and understanding from a new perspective. But then also you have to think about the people around you, because as your company grows, less of the responsibility lays on you, and more of it lays on the employees and individuals that you hire and that are working for you. And so that becomes a whole other element. A lot of times entrepreneurs have a lot of difficulty letting go of their responsibility they can and feel that they can do it better than anybody else can do it. And that's partially because it's their project, it's their baby. They will do whatever it takes to get it done, and others may not feel that exact same way. So I think one thing to combat that and to get other people feeling and going above and beyond to make the same level of quality and the same quality of service as you would do yourself is to help pull people in and give them that feeling of ownership in the company. And there are a number of ways that you can do this, by having conversations with people on a regular basis, where you make sure that there's shared goals, where you involve people in developing the mission and the goals of the company as you're going along, giving them responsibility and the space to make their own decisions or have their own areas where they're responsible for. And I think that as you you see people proving themselves, proving their abilities to do things, you can give more responsibility, and then they will feel that responsibility and that ownership, and be willing to develop it from there. So I think a lot of it comes down to the culture that you create in your company, the fairness that you treat people with, and that of their being able to take that ownership over the outcomes.
Right. Edward.
I totally agree with Sheena. Totally agree. There's nothing else I'd want to add.
All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us in this discussion. And to everyone else who joined this discussion, we've been talking about entrepreneurship, the successes, the challenges, the best practices, taking a global look at entrepreneurship. And it's unfortunate that Tonyi Senayah, Valerie Larbi, and Angela Kafui couldn't join us on this discussion today. But albeit we've still been able to discuss everything we need to discuss, maybe not everything. We will continue the engagement online. You can join the U.S. Embassy, like the U.S. Embassy Facebook page, and follow us on Twitter at U.S. Embassy Ghana, and the conversation will continue from there. My name is Yao Kuono, and I've been the moderator for this session. Thank you very much, and continue in the spirit of entrepreneurship.
Thank you.